All right, welcome everyone to the Tuesday edition of the Pat and Mike Show. Today we have a great guest for everyone. Our audience, our professions couldn't align better. George Horattas with the Mount Elliott Cemetery Association. George is going to get into a lot of what he does, but I know that with everything that everyone's going through right now, estate planning is top of mind. Pre-planning is also a hot subject right now. We get asked questions about it a lot. You've got myself, Mike Rutkowski, Patrick Carrier from the Rutkowski Law Firm. We specialize in estate preservation and asset protection. Pat, from there, I'm going to hand it over to you, and we can get rolling with George.
For sure. And this is one of those topics that falls in the category of important, but we like to ignore. The kind of thing that we don't like to talk about. I know, Mike, you run into it all the time. I do as well. George, I'm sure you do too, where what we do is really important that people get done, but people don't like thinking about disability, incapacity, or death. Those are not fun topics, but it doesn't mean that they're not important. It doesn't mean that they're not relevant. And the difference between kind of facing them head on and making those decisions and answering those hard questions versus going the ostrich with your head in the sand kind of route, those can have different outcomes. So if you wouldn't mind, George, telling us a little bit about who you are personally, kind of what your background is, where you're at now, what life's like.
Well, I grew up in restaurant and bar business, and that's all I knew my first 20 years of working. And my parents decided to retire, and I was going to carry on. And I decided I didn't want to be in another kitchen or behind another bar as long as I lived. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then we learned how ill my mother was. She was battling cancer. And I thought, I should go and visit her friend who worked at a cemetery to see what I should do. And I went, and I learned everything that had to be done. And we were running around last minute. And my mother was getting ready to pass, and we should have been with her rather than running around doing all this planning. And I asked my mother's friend, I said, I have to do what you're doing for a living because I think I just found my calling. I learned how important it is to be prepared. So that's kind of how it all started. And that's about 23 years ago.
I was just going to ask, how long ago was it? That was 23 years ago.
Yeah. I don't know where it all went.
I was going to say, I know you've been at it for a minute, but goodness me.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a wonderful, wonderful. I don't even consider it a job. It's just a wonderful experience every day when I go in.
For sure. When I've talked to you about this in the past, it really does feel like it's a calling for you.
Definitely was. And, I got into it as a result of my mother's death. And I remember how I felt then. And I try and treat everybody accordingly of how I wanted to be treated.
Mm-hmm. And so we have it up on the screen there now. You're with the Mount Elliott Cemetery Association. You could go anywhere. I know you. I know how good you are at what you do. I know how well you connect to people and how deeply you form those relationships. So you could be anywhere doing what you're doing. What is the Mount Elliott Cemetery Association, and why have you chosen, to bless them with your presence? To be only slightly hyperbolic on that one.
The Mount Elliott Cemetery Association, what a lot of people don't realize, it's been around since 1841. So that's 170, I don't know how many years, but it feels like I've worked there that long sometimes. But it's been around since 1841, and it's not for profit. So all the money comes back into the cemeteries. That's why they look as pristine as they do.
Oh, wow.
We cannot be bought or sold. We're a private association. We're run by a board of trustees who handle all the money decisions so that not one person can make a mistake with the money. And this association has been operating like that since 1841 with an impeccable reputation. So
could you, I'm sorry, we've talked before. I wasn't aware of that. I knew that they'd been around, you said almost 200 years in the past, but the same corporate structure, it's the same entity now as it was in the Civil War.
The same.
Good God.
and it's very well taken care of, very, very well run. Uh, I can't say enough about it. I mean, I feel I'm in the best place I can be. I'm proud to show the grounds. I'm proud of the people I work with. They're all very compassionate people, all good at their jobs. And we have a beautiful, beautiful product to show.
That's fantastic.
So let do me a favor, and also the listeners a favor. Let's start like high level. Like, what is the things that you do? What are the services you offer? And like, what would I expect out of coming to meet with you? And what are some of the decisions I need to make?
Well, you know, when people walk through our doors, I know it's hard to walk through our doors. That's one thing I acknowledge. If you're coming into pre-plan, you're facing your own mortality. So I understand it's hard to walk through our doors, let alone if you've had a death. So what I tell people is, let's just get together and open that door, and let's just get together and let me give you a tour of the grounds, and let me show you everything we have. And then you can start to narrow down what you like and dismiss what you don't like. Then once you start to narrow it down, then we'll find something to fit your pocketbook. So you're not under any obligation. The tour costs nothing. You're not pressured. I don't pressure at all. I mean, I want you, when you leave me and you're pre-planned, I want you to feel comfortable with your decision. I want you at peace. I don't want you making decisions that, you know, you can't afford or you feel rushed. So we start with a tour. We go over everything. There's something for every budget. There's ground property, mausoleum. There's private estates. There's cremation property. We have so much that the tour really does help.
Is Mount Elliott, is it one location? Are there multiple locations? Do you have relationships? How does that work out?
Mount Elliott.
Not everyone's right next door, you know.
Yeah, Mount Elliott Cemetery Association has several locations. There are 2 in Detroit. So Mount Elliott is the name of the company, and that was the first cemetery by the Capuchin Monastery, Mount Elliott, 1841. Then in 1888, Mount Olivet, that's at 6th and Van Dyke. And then Resurrection, where I'm based out of, opened in 1963. That's in Clinton Township. And then oftentimes I'm running to our Rochester location, which is Guardian Angel, just north of downtown Rochester. So I'm at Resurrection and Guardian Angel. Then we have a cemetery in Waterford called All Saints. And part of All Saints attached to it is the first certified green cemetery in Michigan. So green cemeteries are becoming a little more popular as well.
What could you tell us a little bit more about that? I mean, what is I have an idea in my mind, but it involves somebody being sort of planted along with a bunch of tulip bulbs. And maybe that's what it is. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's like a meadow. It's kind of a meadow-like setting.
Okay.
And you are buried in something biodegradable, shroud or a basket. There's no embalming. Everything is natural. And you're buried. There's one part where it's just you can't visit, and there's one part where you can and actually pick the property. And then you're memorialized maybe by maybe engraving on a stone, not necessarily a formal headstone. So everything's natural.
Well, that's fantastic. I can see that having a huge appeal to an awful lot of folks these days in terms of just the economic, the environmental impact, all of that. Just taking, I've heard people talk about, well, I don't want to take up space, chuck me in Lake Michigan or something like that. Which is something else, but like to have that sort of permanency, but also that union with nature, that's an amazing thing to be able to offer. And you're the only place that does that?
In Michigan.
In Michigan, well, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
All right.
So George, like, talk me through, if I come in and see you, you know, I'm guessing that I'm picking if I want to be cremated or buried. Probably that's like the first choice. Then like where, So I did have the opportunity to walk your grounds with you, and it is incredible. And the amount of space you guys have, because, you see that large of a facility and you're like, well, you got to run out of space soon. But, from what you're saying, you guys have space that you won't run out of space for another couple hundred years.
No, we just opened up another, I think, 65 acres. So we have a lot of land. We won't see, and your grandkids probably won't see that place filled. Got many, many years to come.
That's great. And so then also, will I be picking like, I don't know, memorial type stuff, like also casket or whatever is going to hold me?
Casket is more for the funeral home part. What you're going to pick with me is the final resting place. So for ground, if you like traditional ground burial, you're going to decide whether you want a flat stone, maybe you want a above ground monument, you might want a family plot. We have a lot of Catholic following, so there's some sections that have a little more of a religious tone. So that might be something that you might want. So there's different types of ground property sections.
And I don't mean to interrupt on this, but I think that what you're talking about and what Mike just asked is an important distinction that most people are not aware of. When people think about a funeral, they think that it's all a thing. They think that the term funeral is everything from a lot space to a vault to the whole ceremony that goes along with it. But it's actually broken up into multiple parts. And this is something that our practice as elder attorneys, as people who focus on that, we touch on, but people will come in and they'll say, oh, I have that taken care of.
I hear that all the time.
What do they have taken care of?
I don't know. But it seems like there's still a lot to do.
Absolutely. Well, and we'll do as some folks are aware and other folks aren't, in Michigan, you can designate a funeral representative.
You can.
If you don't name a specific person, then the law, the state of Michigan will tell you who's managing your funeral arrangements. Whether it's a spouse, your kids, all of your kids voting unanimously, hope they're all on the same page. You don't have kids, maybe you can wind up in situations where siblings, nieces, nephews are the ones making those decisions.
Well, and then they're not going to get along. In every family, there's always someone. And it happened in my own family. So, I tell husbands and wives, you've got to pre-plan so your kids know what you want. You don't want arguments. You don't want doubts. I've had people have remorse of how they buried their loved one because they learned something later that they wanted. And, you don't want to do that. You don't want your kids doing this like I had to do it.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what, Pat, you were originally saying. In both of our fields of work, it's not something people readily talk about. Death is just one of those things where a lot of times you never talk to maybe a spouse or whoever or your family members about what your wishes would be if you were to pass away. I can probably say that I haven't had that conversation with my wife as to what I would want. So that's where picking these things yourself, just like in estate planning, being able to pick who's your agents, your financial medical power of attorney, trustee, those kinds of things. If you don't pick it, someone else is going to, and you probably never had that conversation to let anyone know what you wanted.
Yeah, right. And I tell people, you work hard for your money all your life. By pre-planning, you lock prices in. So why give it to our cemetery or a funeral home at that year's price when you need it, full price? Cemeteries don't wait for money. Money you pay up front before the burial. We don't wait for money. It's not that we're mean. It's just that's how cemeteries operate. We have no recourse if you don't pay. So I tell people, you work hard for your money all your life. Just put a deposit, make payments. There's no bank to deal with. We just send you home with coupons. Don't tell anyone we're really lenient. You didn't hear it from me. But if you have a hard month or a hard time,
George, this is being recorded, right?
Yeah, I know. So, but anyway, you lock prices in and you take your time paying for it. The cost of cemetery and funeral go up every year. it doubles every 10 years. So I tell people, if you don't do this, you're harming yourself.
Mhm.
It just makes so much sense emotionally and financially. What I learned during this pandemic is something I never saw in all the years of doing this. People who had to come in, losing someone is difficult anyway, but losing someone during this pandemic, it broke my heart to take care of these families because they didn't get to see say goodbye to their loved one. They had to plan a funeral by phone. If they didn't have property at the cemetery, I had to meet them in the parking lot and stay far away from them. It was so awful, and I felt it was impersonal, but I had no choice. And everyone that I took care of said to me, I wish I had done this years ago.
Mhm. That right there, I would say that almost every conversation that we have with someone begins with, I needed to do this, I should have done this, I meant to do this. But because the area that we practice in, both of us, is disability, is death, is incapacity, those those are bad things. Those are not days that you want to have, and you're inclined to ignore them. And particularly with your area of work, I do not mean this to sound flippant or lighthearted, but it's kind of like you know the rule where you never go to the grocery store when you're hungry. You don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry. You do not want to be figuring out someone's funeral, someone's end of life, permanent interment, all of that during that period of grief.
No.
You want if you make that choice yourself, you're doing it with sober mind, you're calm, you're collected, you are as unemotional as someone can get about that, and it makes it so much easier for other people. Whereas, and I'm not saying anything about anyone in the industry or about you. I hear smack talk about lawyers all the time. Mike, I don't know if you've ever heard anyone speak ill of attorneys.
A joke every once in a while.
Right, like it's not like there's whole websites about jokes about us. But that's one of those issues with people who are in the funeral home business, who are in the afterlife business, is people will be in a very heightened emotional state, and they'll go in, and it's like, wouldn't mom want the $25,000 gold-plated walnut burl coffin?
You tend to want to overspend.
Exactly, and in that moment, you're like, yes, that's what she wants.
Right.
I I know that me personally, I like the idea of the green funeral. I'm betting I could get in a cardboard box and put under an oak tree for pretty decent, But when you're in that moment and you're trying to pay tribute to your loved ones, do you want to put that really on your kids, or do you want to say, you know what, I've lived this responsible, diligent, humble life. That's what I've done, and that's what I'd like my testament, my afterlife resting place to be. That's a lot easier for you to do than for your kids.
Speaking of the kids, may I say, I've had people tell me, well, I mentioned doing this for my kids. I mentioned pre-planning and my kids freaked out. So they told me, don't do it. They'll take care of it. And I said, if your child can't even fathom the fact of you pre-planning while you're alive and well, is that the child you want at the cemetery making your decisions on the worst day of their life? No.
No, God, no. The number of, and Mike, I know you've dealt with this too. We'll talk to parents, and it's like, well, would you like your kids involved? Oh no, I can't tell Tommy. If I suggest to Tommy that mom is somehow not an immortal who will be here for the next 500 years, it's like, well, life happens. It's gonna happen. They're not the most fun conversations, but they're real. They're important.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and one thing I wanted to bring up about our company is that if you do buy property with us, and we understand that life happens and the changes happen, so you're not stuck with property. If you want to move your property, we'll do that. We'll help you with that. If you just find that you're moving out of the state and just don't want it anymore, we'll buy it back. There's a percentage, but we'll at least buy it back so you're not stuck. So, we're unique in the industry that way, where we will work with you.
And so there are multiple things, and this is something we were kind of talking about earlier.
Mhm.
These different aspects to what goes into all of a funeral. I mean, there's on the day of, there's flowers and music. There's also a car frequently to take you from point A to point B, but then there's the real estate portion. I mean,
It's interesting you brought that
there are
up
different
because
aspects.
what I tell people, when you plan a wedding, how long do you usually take to plan a wedding? About a year?
No, I was going to say like a long lunch. Well, but I have been married. Mike, you got married. How long does that take?
So,
Yeah.
okay. So
Yeah, a minute or
you're
two.
planning church, clothes, music, food,
Mhm.
all these.
Flowers, band, bar, the list goes on forever.
Okay, so a lot of things you're doing for a funeral as well. And how long do you have to plan that? 36 hours, maybe? So,
Oh,
I tell people you've got to pre-plan. You
that-
don't want to do all this in just a few days when you feel like doing nothing.
yeah. Mike, have you ever considered it that I've never actually thought about it that way, but it is
No.
basically throwing a mini wedding overnight when you might not expect that it was coming.
Yeah, that
I mean,
sounds
that's
insane.
that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey,
And the
George.
money alone, that you
Yeah.
have to find in
Mhm.
those few short hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, George, Julie has a question, and this goes to something I was going to ask you as well. What is the best way for someone to get in touch with you? And do you hold events at all during the year that maybe someone could come and learn more information about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my direct line is 586-226-3401. We have pre-planning seminars we do throughout the year. I can take you on a tour personally. I can put you on my mailing list. We do have a handy personal planning organizer that I can give you that will help you start to record all the important information you might want to share with your family about what your wishes are for funeral and burial. There's a page in it where you can write all the things down that are asked for a death certificate and an obituary. So there's a very handy book. So I have a lot of tools, and people can just email me or call me, and I can start the ball rolling to get them at least on my mailing list and touch base with them.
Very
Do
good.
you have an events page where someone can go to see, or is it just easiest to get in touch with you directly? Like, how do people find out about that?
Right now, due to the circumstances, I'm not sure how we're handling everything, but I think
Fair enough. Yeah.
the best way is for just to touch base with me so that I can at least get you on my list and find out what your comfort level is. You might want to come in next week and take a tour. You might not quite be ready for that, and you might just want to wait for the next seminar, or you might want to wait and just be on the mailing list for mailings we do. I let people pick what they want to do. I don't want them feeling,
Yeah, it seems like everyone's got their own comfort level at the moment.
Right.
One of the things I'd like you, just if you could take a minute or two to talk about, there is I think either misconception or an idea, the difference between what do I want to say, locked in permanence and security. What I mean by that is, if somebody, I know that people will occasionally, when they're talking with us or when they're talking about funeral planning, things like that, they're like, well, if I do this, then it's carved in stone, then this is locked in and I can't change it. What happens if, as you say, move out of state, or what happens if my wishes change? I think about this from the point of view of my grandparents, devout Catholics who, for their whole lives, for almost their whole lives, cremation was not an option. That was not a thing that Catholics could do. That changed, and that's the route they wound up going. If they had planned ahead, I think there are some people who would think, well, that means that I have to go this one route.
No.
We've talked in the past. That's really not the way it goes.
Not at all.
Change it as long as you're alive, competent, and able to voice those changes, correct?
Correct. We will change the property based on,
Yeah.
what preference you now have.
Mhm.
As far as cremation goes, we have a lot. I tell people, people will call me and say, well, send me info on cremation property. I said, well, I can have your brochure and, price sheet I can send you. I said, but what I'd like to do is give you a little tour of what we have, because cremation is increasing, and there's constantly new ways to memorialize your loved ones, things people haven't even seen yet. This tour has about 5 stops. There's
Okay.
there's indoor there's indoor niches. Niches are small squares on the mausoleum wall that have your name and years on them, and the urn goes in there. There's niches indoor, outdoor. Some niches are glass where you can show an urn. Some niches have a black front where you're able to photo laser and almost tell a story on the front of the niche. There's cremation benches. There's new granite items called cremorials. I mean, we have so many new things that and all different, and to fit every budget, that really coming in to see it is amazing. And people often tell me during the tour, I had no idea there was this much. And
Hmm.
and then they pick something out that they never even knew they could have had or never considered.
And that I also think is what's so beautiful about the pre-planning, because if you are the person who's going in there to choose it for yourself, you can take a moment, you can consider it, you can appreciate those options. If you're the child and you're saying, all right, this funeral is 36, 48 hours from now, that could potentially be overwhelming. And I know that you'll hold people's hands, you'll walk them through that, you'll make it as easy as it can, but I think in my experience, Mike, I know in yours as well,
Yep.
if people can pre-plan for that to take that pressure off, I mean, why would you not do that?
I know.
Right. I just,
It's truly a gift to the kids.
it truly.
Oh, it is. And to your loved one,
Hmm.
and to your loved one. I mean, you've got to,
And who knows,
you know,
maybe your kids are your loved one
yeah, well, yeah.
in some families.
It's like I had one couple tell me they were thinking of ground burial, but then they were considering mausoleum crypt, which is above the ground.
Hmm.
And they said, well, we'll just spend the least because no one's going to come and visit anyway. And then they told me when they chose mausoleum, they said, what we realized is we have to think about one of us being in their 80s visiting the other one.
Hmm.
And we wanted it to be clean and dry surface, even if they visited in the winter, which you can't do that in the middle of a ground section. And
Hmm.
that dawned on me. I learned a lot from these families that I've taken care of all these years of things they tell me. And I thought, wow, that was really profound that, not only are you thinking of your kids, but you got to think of the other one you're leaving behind.
Hmm. That actually dovetails really well with a lot of what we try to do and try to focus on, which is a lot of people focus on what the law says. What does the law say? What are the words on the page? What are the numbers and the code citations and those sorts of things? And those are really important. You have to get that right. But what is the practical impact on someone's life? How does that actually play out? Um, it's the difference between, are they going to have to go and talk to a judge? Are they going to have to talk to a guardian ad litem? Are they going to have to work through that process? Or can they just pull out a document, pull out a piece of paper, a trust, a power of attorney, and then act? Similar to your side, are they going to have to go through these hoops? Are they going to have to, take these additional steps? Or will things just be laid out? Things just be planned ahead? And to my mind, one of the greatest gifts you can give your loved ones is in those hard times, take something off their plate. The best, it sounds crazy, but the best funerals I've ever been to, because I've been to some dynamite funerals, have been from people who planned them out. Everything was taken care of. They picked the music, they catered it. They were like, you know what? This is going to be the party to celebrate me, right? And when that's done, it changes the whole atmosphere. Similar with what we do. If you plan it out, people will go along with it. And it's just, hey, what's the next step? What did mom and dad lay out? But if you don't do that, if you leave those open doors for questions, for combativeness, for squabbling, that's where that's going to come in. You know,
Yeah, I've seen it over. I've seen it over and over. You know, I've always had people tell me I'm so glad I pre-planned. I've never had anyone tell me I regret pre-planning. Never.
No. People hesitate to pre-plan their funeral. People hesitate to pre-plan their estate plan, or they won't protect their assets. But never have we had someone do it, and they're like, "Well, I shouldn't have done that.
Exactly.
It was terrible that I put my seatbelt on. You know, it was terrible that I took my vitamins each morning. Ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know."
Yeah.
That's funny. All right,
All right.
George.
Mike?
We appreciate having you on. It's clear that you're passionate about what you do, and you might have been doing this for a minute. Could you give everyone your number again? Just, it seems like that's the best way to get in touch with you to walk through some options.
Yes, my number is 586-226-3401.
Thank you for your wealth of knowledge today. Pleasure having you on as a guest.
It was an honor. Thank you.
And we will we'll be putting your contact information in the description below the video. So if anyone has any questions, they want to reach out to you, they're free to do that, correct?
Yes. Pleasure.
All right. Very good.
All right, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.